there's no question what this is. Or, for that matter, what this is. There are literally thousands of different kinds of frogs and toads in a whole rainbow of colors and every kind of shape and size imaginable. Get ready for some surprises as we investigate the weird and wonderful world of frogs. Hello, I'm Thane Maynard, and welcome to Animals in Action. We've got an amazing cast of characters lined up for today's show. Amazing to look at, amazing to listen to, and amazing to watch as they go about their daily lives. And here to help me keep track of this remarkable and far-reaching family of frogs and toads is Keith Shackleton of the Drawing Board.
Hello. They really are incredible, aren't they? Every size, shape, color in these little animals.
That's right. We'll have a chance to examine all the varieties in a moment, but let's start out with some of the basic features common to almost all frogs. These huge bulbous eyes are typical. The eyes, nostrils, and eardrum are all in a line, so only a small part of the frog is visible above water. They have to have such large eyes because they're nearly all nocturnal. This is a green tree frog, but not all frogs are green. Far from it. The one thing they do all have in common is that they all hop. The powerful hind legs are much larger than the front ones, pushing the frogs forward. If we look at the feet, we can see that some frogs have special adaptations. This is a tree frog clinging to a sheet of glass. At the end of each toe, there's what looks like a sucker. Those swollen tips allow the tree frog to climb about among the leaves and branches where it lives. Some never even come to the ground. Keith, you know the way a tree frog can actually hang on a piece of glass in an aquarium?
Yeah.
It gives a lot of people the mistaken idea that they have a suction cup right on the end of their toe. Could you draw what they actually hold themselves up with?
Yeah, I'm not surprised about this, you know, because I thought they had suction cups on their toes for years until someone pointed this out. If that's the smooth surface, the little toe is spread out at the end, we noticed that. And it looks like a sucker, but it's not. It's just to increase the area of contact with the surface. Inside the toe, there's a gland which secretes a sticky substance all the way along, which undoubtedly helps it a lot. But the important part is this, that undersurface is absolutely covered with thousands of tiny hairs, so tiny that they can lock into crevices, would you believe, in smooth glass, let alone in a leaf.
That's amazing. And another sticky feature shared by most frogs and toads is their long, sticky tongue. This is a narrow-mouthed toad from Africa eating termites. Here's a running frog doing the same. The actual strike is so quick that even in slow motion, it's difficult to follow the action. It'll eat 40 or 50 in one sitting. Well, I hope that toad enjoyed its dinner. Keith, you know, the one thing everybody knows about frogs is those incredible sounds they make. Yeah. You know, all the croaking and ribbiting. Well, how does such a little guy make such a big noise?
And that's what I asked myself about Scotsman Thane with the bagpipes. It's the same principle. We've got two little frogs here looking out of a lily pond at us. But let's take a typical frog. Now, there is a vocal sac, a balloon that's blown up with air from the frog's lungs. Now, When that's full, it'll be pumped back into the lungs again and back and forth between throat sac and lungs over a resonator. The throat sac itself acts as an amplifier and increases the noise so that you can hear it for miles. And the sounds are so different because the throat sacs are different. You'll get another sort of frog that's got two little ones, one either side, like that, and they'll blow up together. There's even one, the most extraordinary one of all, that's got an ordinary one, throat sac here like that, but it's got two little ones on it that stand up just like that, and I think that's really amazing.
It is. It's phenomenal. You know, it's only the males who do all the croaking, and they do it to attract a female during the breeding season. But each species makes its own unique sound, so there's no confusion among the frogs. The variety is unbelievable, not only in the noises they make, but also in the songs they sing. All frogs and toads belong to a group called amphibians, which comes from the Greek meaning double life animals. They start life as water animals, equipped with gills and living totally underwater like fish. And then they undergo a remarkable transformation that turns them into land-dwelling animals that can breathe air directly. Keith, could you show us how this life cycle actually works?
I think so, Thane. Well, we got a frog here to begin it all, a typical frog, all wet and slippery out of the pond. Now, that's an adult, so you might expect eggs from that. And what you'd get is this kind of thing, jelly with black spots. Now, there might be just one according to the species, or there might be 10,000, because these do vary so much. But what about the next stage? Well, inside the egg, it's changing shape. It's elongating. We go a little bit further, and we find that out of the egg comes a very familiar little animal, a tadpole. Now, that tadpole is going to grow till he becomes quite a shapely animal, but he's still very much an underwater animal, breathing with gills. But in time, you'll notice that back legs are forming. And a little bit later on, front legs are forming. Give it a while longer, and you've got an animal that is beginning to leave the water and jump up onto the land. And it's an animal that is beginning to look very much more like a frog, except that it's still got a little stumpy tail here. And finally, we're back to where we started, and we've got an adult frog again.
That's right. And although this pattern is typical of most frogs, there's considerable variation from one species to the next. This American bullfrog has already found a mate, and the pair are ready to spawn. The eggs are laid in large clumps, surrounded by a protective jelly. There may be several hundred eggs in each clump. Within a few days, the eggs begin to change shape. They elongate and start to take form. Two days later, and the little tadpoles are hanging onto the outside of the jelly. Within 2 weeks, the tadpoles are free swimming and feeding. They'll eat almost anything, plants or dead animals. The next stage is the appearance of legs. The hind legs develop first while the tadpole continues to grow. The tadpole's mouth is well equipped with rows of teeth, which it'll shed before it becomes a frog. The front legs appear next, usually one at a time. Its lungs are already developing, and soon it will make its first excursion out of the water. The tail is beginning to lose its fins and shrink. The hind legs are growing and looking more like frog's legs, ready to leap away from danger. The tail is merely a little stump now, completely absorbed. It's now a fully formed, inch-long frog. The African bullfrog is a much larger creature altogether. Males can reach 8 inches in length and width. The females are tiny and almost disappear with egg laying. Unlike the clumps of the American bullfrog, this one scatters its eggs all over the bottom of the pool. She may lay up to 6,000 at a time. The tadpoles develop and hatch very quickly. They have to because these pools are only a temporary feature on the African countryside. They'll soon dry up. As the drought sets in, the tadpoles, struggling in what little water remains, turn cannibalistic and begin to eat each other. It really is a case of survival of the fittest. Those that do survive develop into little frogs within 3 to 4 weeks. Compare that to the American bullfrog that takes 2 years. Now they have to feed furiously on anything they can find in order to fatten themselves up to see them through the long dry season. I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine. This is Bufo. It's short for Bufo marinus, the Latin name of the marine toad. They're also called the giant toad, and they eat so many insects they've been imported into places like Florida and Hawaii and even Australia to take care of pests. The trouble is, those folks have found out they don't just eat insects, they eat everything, and now they're even a bigger pest than the things they've come to take care of. But to keep themselves from being eaten, they've got some great tricks. You can see he's kind of blown up with air. That's to make him look tougher and harder to swallow. But his best defense are these poison sacs. One behind his eye, and then along his belly, and another one on his hind leg. That one's to keep him from being attacked from behind by a snake or something. The poison they secrete is strong enough to kill a dog or to make a human seriously ill. Now, even though they're called the marine toad, they don't live in the sea. They live in brackish waters, partly salty. And even though they're the giant toad, they don't have a giant tadpole. They have a very tiny tadpole that changes into a very tiny toad like this one. And they take over 7 years to mature. Now, Bufo's a male, and he's only about half as big as a female giant toad. They're the biggest in the world, and they grow to be as big as a football. But now back to a frog's idea of heaven, the West Indian rainforest on the island of Trinidad. This place is also a frog watcher's paradise. Warm and humid, perfect for frogs. Their calls can be heard almost anywhere, day and night. These are the tadpoles of one of the many species of tree frogs that live here. Each one looks like a typical tadpole, but what's interesting is the fact that they throng together, moving around in large, solid clumps of 200 or 300. There's safety in numbers, and the tadpoles escape predators by looking like one large animal moving through the water. As soon as they develop their adult characteristics, then they live as individuals and disperse into the vegetation around the river. They'll reach their adult size in 2 or 3 years. Most frogs sleep tucked up in the leaves during the day, becoming active only after dark, hunting among the branches for moths and other insects. This is a giant tree frog, one of the world's largest. It has a very special way of breeding. It's one of a small group of frogs that actually builds its own breeding pool. There it is within a few feet of the river's edge. It's about 1 foot across, and inside the frogs have laid their eggs. It's timed to the rains so that once the eggs have hatched, the river will flood and wash the tadpoles away.
The giant tree frogs. Well, the behavior of those tree frogs didn't look all that special. But in fact, it's very canny indeed. Now, if we have a little sketch here, I'll show you. This is a lot of bamboo, a clump of bamboo beside a river. And it's the bamboo is where the tree frogs live. Right, well, here comes the river. in diagram just a section of the river, like that, bank the other side, and there's the level of the water. Now, these tree frogs dig themselves out a little hole on the other bank there, and that fills up to the same level because the water filters through the gravel. They've therefore got themselves a little private breeding pool, and there go the eggs. And those eggs are going to hatch into tadpoles, and the tadpoles will be confined in there and they'll need food. But it's so arranged that the rains come about then, and up goes the level of the water, and they can swim free because they're now in the main body of the river. But the canny thing about it, from the tree frog's point of view, was that those young have been got over the first hurdle when they're tiny and when every predator is against them.
You can see that each egg has only a minimum of protective jelly. It doesn't need more because it's safe in its breeding pool. After a few days, the eggs are beginning to change shape and wriggle. Each tadpole has a large supply of yolk to keep them going until the river floods. The plants of Trinidad are abundant and very diverse. These are bromeliads, a large group of plants that grow all over the wetter parts of the tropics. They're well known as house plants too, but they grow high up among the trees, just like ferns and orchids sometimes grow. At the base of each leaf, there's a little pool of rainwater collected by the leaves. It's here that several species of frogs have adapted to live. This is one of the rarest. It has no common name, but it's known to science as Amphotis. It doesn't just live here, it breeds here too. Two or three eggs are laid in each pool, and the tadpole feed on rotting vegetation and drowned insects. Amazingly, this little frog is only found in one species of bromeliad at the top of one mountain on one island, Trinidad. We've moved to Africa now to look at yet another species of frog with a curious way of breeding. The burrowing frog actually lays its eggs in an underground chamber close to a pond. There it sits on them until they hatch. As soon as the tadpoles hatch, they slither all over her body, and she keeps them moist with water stores in her bladder. She's dug a tunnel down to the pool, and after a few days, the tadpoles begin to slide down it. Once they make it to the pool, they'll develop normally, and after changing into frogs, will immediately burrow into the soil. It's just another case of a frog protecting its eggs from danger. South America is the home of the poison arrow frogs, a beautiful and yet deadly group of little frogs. Native Indians catch the frogs and use their skin secretions to tip their arrows, and it's the most potent natural poison known. The poison arrow frogs are tree frogs, not pond frogs, so there's always a problem about keeping the tadpoles moist. To solve it, they have developed a remarkable adaptation. They actually carry the tadpoles around on their backs until they find a suitable place to leave them.
While we're still on the subject of South American poison arrow frogs, I'd like to bring up something I often get asked about. Young people especially want to know, if I handle a frog or a toad, will I get warts? Keith, have you ever heard that question?
Yeah, I was brought up on that one.
That's right. Well, the answer is obviously no. Frogs and toads look warty, but they don't cause warts in others. But it should be pointed out that a number of amphibians do secrete poisons that are mildly irritating to human skin, and that the poison arrow frog secretes a poison that is potentially deadly. So I guess I'd say show a little caution in handling most frogs and toads, but don't worry about warts.
Yes, frogs and toads are remarkable, each species with its own special adaptations. The whole variety of noises they make and the apparatus they have to make them. The extraordinary places where they lay their eggs, and even more extraordinary ways they look after their tadpoles.
But amazingly, even with the tremendous variety we've seen today, we've still only glimpsed the tip of the iceberg. There's one frog, would you believe, that actually rears its tadpoles in its stomach. Well, I'll leave you now pondering the sort of problems that one might lead to. Join us again next time for more Animals in Action.